Hello and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today I have a counter talk episode. We are going to be taking a look at different firearm color options and talk about sort of this recent phenomenon in the past, I'll call it 5 to 10 years, where colored firearms have become increasingly very popular. Talking about flat dark earth, OD green, combat gray, even some specialty colors like pink and yellow, and just the types of colors on firearms you see everywhere today that used to not be so popular in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s. A lot of people who are our older viewers probably remember a time when it was just black and stainless and nothing else. But now we're seeing firearms in all sorts of different colors and color arrangements and that sort of thing. So we'll go ahead and talk about that. Sorry for the long-winded introduction. Let's jump into that now. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're starting to see firearms everywhere in all sorts of different colors, color configurations. Now, earlier, kind of around, I'll say the 50s, 60s, during kind of the Cold War era, post-World War II, we did start to see color configurations coming out in different firearms. The Cear AUG is a prime example of that. Is one of the first early combat rifles that came out in a standard color that wasn't black or wood. German G3, of course, you have the jungle and the OD green furniture, which I have on this one. So these two represent sort of the change in color adoption, and that leads us into one reason that people are going into different color change options, and that's for military use. Because of some of that, I think we're starting to see an evolution in what we've seen in the Call of Duty franchise and other video games. All this sorts of customization that's happened in those video games with different colors and color schemes, which we are starting to see translate over into the firearm market as well, especially as the younger generations are reaching the age of 18 and plus, where they are getting into actually buying real live firearms. Whereas the previous exposure, what actually may have gotten them into firearms in the first place, is video games. Another thing too is movies. So the entertainment industry specifically follows along with military, especially the United States military, as we have been involved since about 2002 or 2002, 2003 with the war in Iraq, and then again in Afghanistan. So of course, a lot of movies and video games are based around that, and we do see a lot of military firearms in the United States military that have adopted, of course, flat dark earth or desert tan camouflage schemes. Usually those are spray painted on, or what we've seen in polymer firearms where dyes are added to the polymer furniture to change its color. So because of these are the main influences that I have seen that have translated over into the commercial market, is to where you start to see if there's a firearm now that's released like an XDS or an XDE or a Rex Zero or a SIG P320, they don't just come out in black or stainless anymore. They come out in flat dark earth and OD green and black. And I want to talk about sort of the differences and the advantages in purchasing in those different color options, if that satisfies sort of the thing that you're looking for. Also on the civilian or the commercial market, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we're talking the era of the pre-ban rifles. The original HK91s, the Cear AUGs that came in. Now those were in the OD green stock configurations. Again, their military counterparts were that way. That's how they were issued. Colt AR-15 sporting rifles like the SP1 and the AR-15, they called it the A2 Sporter. Again, only offered in black or gray. Keep in mind too, going back, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, starting off historically around, about the time that firearms that fired self-contained cartridges started becoming popular. Even prior to that, back at muzzleloaders, cold bluing was the, I should say cold bluing, salt bluing, whichever. And I'm not an expert on different finish techniques, so I'm sure you experts will come along and correct me or leave some information for us down in the comment section. But it was essentially you had blued, and then you had nothing else. And then we get into the 30s and 40s. We have phosphating, we have parkerizing. If you look at M1 Garands, M1 basically the United States military weapons from World War II, they had parkerizing applied, which now you have kind of the dull gray slash kind of OD, very, very deep OD-esque green finish on the metal. But that was about it. You get into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we start seeing polymers showing up as firearm furniture. Now, when you introduce polymer, it's a lot easier to inject different dyes to change the camouflaging schemes or the color schemes. Again, the main purpose for doing that was for camouflage, obviously, against other people, not for hunting. So that was the first sort of iteration we start to see showing up on firearms as a means of camouflaging. Now, again, prior to this, in World War II and World War I, other sorts of camouflaging measures were taken. I'm sure firearms were painted. They were never really issued that way, but you would see guys wrap different foliage and sort of stuff around their firearms. Going back to the Japanese and the Pacific, that was common practice. You even see it in pop culture, like Saving Private Ryan, Enemy at the Gates, how they're wrapping the different, camouflage type, I don't know, whatever material they had, parts of their rain ponchos and stuff like that wrapped around their firearms to make them look a little bit more camouflaged. And that's where I'm going to argue that this whole phenomenon with firearm coloring started. It was a sort of military-esque type adaptation to a firearm, which gives it that cool factor. It makes it more unique, and that's what we're starting to see sort of in the civilian market, or I should say the commercial market here in the United States, and I'm sure other places, limited places around the world where you can buy commercially. It's interesting though, because for example, I'm in Indiana and we don't have a lot of desert type terrain, but we sell at our store a lot of desert type tan or flat dark earth color schemed like these firearms, but of course we don't have any desert around. So obviously, and I'm not gonna lie, I think they're cool, they're different, they're attractive, they're appealing. But they're not so practical really for their original military intended purposes like we saw here. And that kind of leads me into my next point. Do you have to purchase a firearm solely for, if it is flat dark earth or OD green, or we see even now the Steyr AUG A3 M1s, you can get in that kind of ghost white, I think they call it, or recon white, whatever the name is. Which could be great for people who live in very snowy climates, again, for that camouflage type ability. But I have transferred these in white for people, and in Indiana we get snow maybe, a month or two out of the year. So I guess it could be good for that, and here usually it dries up pretty quickly when we get it. So that sort of leads us into the customization and just having something that's different. Firearms, like I said, traditionally have been black for such a long time, so it is an option to say, okay, I have black firearms in everything. I'm looking at getting an XDS. The combat gray is an awesome color. It still is dark enough to where it's practical, to where I can conceal it, but it's different, it's unique. It's not just black like everything else I have. And I think with anything else, there are the people who are just like strictly practical, and that's all a firearm should be. It's a tool, and I agree with that to a certain extent. But at the same time, a lot of people take pride in their firearms collections. They enjoy showing them off. They enjoy looking at the firearms they have, and having a little bit of variety or something that's just a little bit more appealing or different is just a way that some people like to go. It doesn't necessarily have to be practical. So those are some of the reasons I think we're seeing changes, is to kind of coincide with an evolving generation getting into firearms, the pop culture with movies, military involvement in other countries, and video game franchises, of course, like Call of Duty, who are helping kind of create that sort of interest and appeal in a customized type firearm. Customized firearms or colored firearms do create, I think, that sort of elitism, like we see in the SIG P226 Elysian. It's kind of in that gray type, phosphate type color. It's sleek, it's cool, it's unique, and like we see in these Call of Duty video games, the heroes running around with these really tacticaled out, they have every which light and laser and optic on it, and it's got these awesome camo schemes and looks awesome. Now, standard issue in the military, you're not going to have these, heavily configured and modified and camouflaged firearms. Maybe I'm wrong about that to a certain extent, but when you do it yourself, and you see a lot of kids doing this with airsoft guns. I used to play airsoft. it creates a certain sense of individuality and importance, I think, that you have with that firearm. It makes it more yours, which I think just creates sort of that feel of elitism with the firearm itself. Makes you feel more operator and cool. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But I think that that's what a lot of it has to do with. Another thing is an advance in technology. So it's easier than it used to be when you had steel frames and steel slides like on 1911s, or 1903 pocket hammerlesses, or the old high powers, or anything like that from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Again, you had the bluing technology, phosphating, parkerizing. There was very much limitations in, of course, the metal type finishes, and because you didn't have polymers really then, there was a lot you could, that you were limited to with the dyes that were available to you as well. Now, we are in the era of polymer firearms, so it is easy, but just a little step added to just add a dye to the polymer to change the color. And of course, like I said, we started seeing this in the AUG. Other things as well is the advent of Cear Coating and Duracoating. So Cear Coating and Duracoat. Cear the Cear and Cear is for ceramic. It is a ceramic-based process where the finished substance is applied, and then it has to be heated. So you do have to put it in a kiln or an oven. It is not recommended you do that in your home oven, so you're not getting those types of chemical particles over your oven, which you're also cooking food in. So there is some setup that is required. There's some equipment you would need if you want to do Cear Coating. And then there's Duracoating, which I believe is just a chemical type spray like a paint, which can air dry. There is a form of Cear Coating which can also air dry, but I don't believe they use those on slides and things like that. I think those are used more on barrels and those sorts. But again, I'm not an expert on different finishing processes, so somebody who is can chime in the comment section. So it is because of those advents and different technologies that has allowed us the capability to easily, add these different types of processes to them. Now, I know I'm rambling. I'm going to try and close this off with some thoughts in terms of, I own a gun store, and I do get a lot of people who, and this is sort of, the whole concept of this video is from the perspective of a gun store owner and the sorts of trends that I see. Now, when you're talking about customizing a firearm, there's basically, I'm going to start with two ways from the get-go here. You can purchase it factory configured like this. This is even a Glock 26 from the factory with a gray frame and also a gray slide, and this slide is Cear coated by Glock at the factory. And they don't do these. I think this was a SHOT Show 2017 special edition. They don't make a ton of these. It's not typical normal process, but this is considered a factory firearm. Now, is there going to be, first of all, is there going to be a big price difference if you're going to a firearm store and you're looking at a Glock 26 that's, let's pick up the XDS. The XDS that has a gray frame versus the XDS that has a black frame. Is there going to be a massive cost difference? No. The dealer is not necessarily paying more for the firearms, so there shouldn't be a massive price difference between the two. Now, you can see, like, if they make these in flat dark earth and gray and black. Now, if a gun store like myself orders 10 of these in gray and 10 of them in black and 10 of them in flat dark earth, and the black and the gray is selling quickly but the flat dark earth is moving out slowly, they might offer sales on those color options just to move them out and get rid of them because nobody's interested in them at that particular time at that store. But generally, as a rule of thumb, no, you're not going to see a difference. Should you expect a difference in what you should expect to get on the used market based on the color of a firearm? Again, as long as we're staying with traditional like OD green or flat dark earth or combat gray or anything like that, that's more of a traditional type combat-esque, saying with air quotes, color, it really is not going to hurt your value too much. Sure, if you have a firearm in flat dark earth, you might have, if I took a random sample of 10 people interested in my SIG P320, because it's flat dark earth, I might lose 3 people that are interested who might want a black one. But it's not going to be a massive difference that I found. Let's just put it this way. When somebody comes into my store and they want to sell me a used gun and it's flat dark earth, I don't take that really into consideration in terms of offering them less money or anything. I think that at least here they sell just as well as a black firearm or anything. And I think a lot of people too, if they're really interested in getting a used P320 and they think, yeah, I want a black one, but they come into my store and they see a used one that's at the price that they want, it's really easy for them to talk themselves into it. Well, you know, it is different. I don't have anything else like it in color. Everything else I own is black. Okay, fine, I'll go ahead and get it. Now, one difference to that is if it's not a factory finished job. For example, you know, this is a factory Glock 26 with a gray frame and a Cear coated slide to match in gray, so it's all gray. Because this is factory, it even says gray on the box, which I don't have to show. It's over in the corner, but I'm sure you trust me. This is a factory firearm. Being factory does maintain its value. I will say, though, that if I have somebody who, and I've had this happen, I had somebody bring in a Kimber that was Cear coated by a gunsmith in a very light gray, almost light blue looking color. When I look at something like that, I say, I'm not as interested, because I think, put yourselves in the shoes of the buyer who's coming into the store looking at a used Kimber that has been non-factory finished. Okay, you're worried about who did the job, how well of a job did they do, how long is this finish going to hold up, and if the finish doesn't hold up well, it's not like it was a firearm that was finished from the factory. You can't call and complain and ask for warranty work on it. The factory is going to say, hey, this thing was Cear coated by somebody who wasn't us. We can't stand behind this, you know, and that's understandable. Also, there's just something about, there's a little bit of a, I'm going to say like brand loyalty. Brand loyalty is probably a bad word for it. There's a little bit of traditionalism, I want to say, I guess is the word I'm looking for, where people, they want the traditional, original firearm as it left the factory. If something's been refinished or messed with or altered, even if we're just talking a Glock, that tends to turn some people off to the firearm. Now, don't get me wrong, if the price is outstanding and it's like a total steal, then you're going to get plenty of people who will buy it and look past the fact. But that means, as a gun store, I have to price it at a total steal, which means I can't price it the same I would as another factory finished firearm. So that's something to consider there. If you work at a gun store or own a gun store in another part of the country and you disagree with me on that point, and maybe you see a difference in your clientele, let me know down in the comment section. That would be interesting point of conversation. Moving into my final point here, and I have this one here to illustrate the point. Let's talk about non-traditional military colors. So here we have pink. You do see, and this is a Colt LE 6920. This is what they call the Muddy Girl camo scheme, and this did leave Colt in this camo configuration. This was not added. You do get, and this is kind of what I call specialty type colors. Specialty type colors, by in nature, and this is just my own definition, is they're going to, by nature, appeal to a very small segment or a fringe of the market. So in this case, it's pretty safe to say that this rifle, based on its color, I'm just making a generalization here, is going to apply mostly to women. On top of that, I get a lot of women here in my store, and I have had pink guns in my store. And I will say 8 out of 10 women who come in my store, it's funny, it's usually the boyfriends and the husbands that recommend the pink guns or want to buy the pink guns for gifts. 8 times out of 10, the woman doesn't want the pink gun. They want something that's black or just a standard color, and the pink doesn't really appeal to them. So when you have a firearm like this is the type of thing that, even though it was done at the factory, if a customer brings something like this in as opposed to a standard LE 6920, I'm going to offer significantly less for this. Because there is a very, very, very small market of people who are going to come in looking for it. Again, if I price this thing at like $300, an LE, a very lightly used LE 6920 with Magpul furniture, I'm sure there's plenty of guys who would jump all over that at that price, because then they'll just refinish it or something. But again, that means I have to sell it at $300, which means, again, I can't offer very much for it. Whereas an original, you know, an all black or even a flat dark or a Colt 6920, the market opens way up to something like that. Now you can, again, firearms like this you can also find, like, not even in pink, but yellow and red and zombie green and orange and all sorts of crazy colors. Those, I will also argue, do much of the same thing. So if you go buy a really nice, let's say, Bravo, and I've seen some people do this Bravo company, and they put on like skeletonized furniture and all that sort of stuff, and then have the whole thing painted red because it's their competition gun and it's unique to them. If you're going to do that and you like it that way and you want to keep it, you know, that's totally fine. You do with it whatever you want. But if it's something that you think, hey, here's my $2,500 Bravo Company AR-15, and I'm going to pay a gunsmith a couple $100 to Cear Coat the thing red, and put $800 worth of different furniture on it, and then when I'm tired of this thing in 2 years, I'm going to turn around and sell it, and get most of my money back. The one thing I said in that process is that Cear Coat job is going to kill you, because people are going to be look at it and say, I don't want a red AR-15. Very few people would. But again, if it were OD green or flat dark earth or black or anything like that, that's a different story. But again, and also non-factory finishes can hurt the value as well. Anyway, guys, that is my very long-winded counter talk and rambling session on different firearm colors. I thought that this would just be an interesting conversation point. I get a lot of people in asking for firearms in different colors, and talking about this sort of thing does seem to be a recent phenomenon that I looked on YouTube and nobody really talks about. So anyway, I thought I would just talk about it a little bit. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, or want to leave your own feedback, please do so in the comment section. I'd be happy to read that and engage in any type of meaningful conversation with you guys. Again, if you enjoyed this, please let me know by hitting that like button or subscribing to our channel if you want to see other content like this. I do have a lot of firearms that are being shipped in, which I will continue to do the firearm comparison videos with, so stay tuned for that. Again, guys, this is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV. We will see you next time.